Okay, what's going on? This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. It is Sunday, May 26, 2024. NJ and LDN, my man MIB in Below. The Maple Leafs not doing a hell of a lot, but we're expecting things to ramp up here in the next few weeks ahead. Mr. Augello, there's a few things to discuss when it comes to the Leafs coaching situation. The new head coach being introduced. He may have an assistant coming on board, the former head coach getting a new job. And then there's, Mitch Marner, whether he's going to be traded or not. I know a lot of fans want him gone. A few fans want him to stay. It's a little bit more complicated than that. We can talk a little bit about the Final Four, which is pretty friggin' awesome. So where do you want to start this morning?
Well, let's start with Sheldon Keefe because I think some people were surprised that he was hired as the new head coach of the New Jersey Devils. I mean, he had the 2-year contract extension from the Leafs that they gave him last summer. He could have enjoyed his time in cottage country and traveled and did whatever him and his family wanted to do. But like a lot of these coaches, I mean, sitting around for a year and wondering if you're going to get a job. I mean, if you have a chance to get a job, you're going to jump at it. And he got a pay raise and I think it was a 4-year extension or 4-year contract from the Devils.
So is he being paid by the Devils and the Maple Leafs?
No. Once the Devils got permission from the Leafs, and the Devils are paying him more than what the Leafs were paying him on the extension, it wipes out what the Leafs were going to pay him. So he's on the Devils payroll, and his commitment to the Leafs is done.
Okay.
And their commitment to him is done. So I'm happy for him, and I also think it shoots down all this crap that we heard, over the last year that Sheldon Keefe is not a good coach, or Sheldon Keefe is, he's just Kyle Dubas's boy, and the only place he's going to get a job is Pittsburgh. Well, he had enough respect around the league that Tom Fitzgerald hired him and considered it a get. And I mean, I think Sheldon Keefe is a good coach. I just think that the situation in Toronto was he had been here for 4.5 years. Maybe the message was getting a little stale. The fact that they only got past the first round once. I don't think it was on Sheldon Keefe. It's on the players, and it's about friggin' time the players were held to account. Now, whether they can be held to account, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but this is more a roster situation than a coaching situation.
This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, OakRidgeFord.com. Don't forget, I'm not only your guy for Maple Leafs podcast content every Sunday, but I'm also your guy for your next vehicle. Whether you want to lease, finance, looking for an electric, internal combustion engine, an SUV, an F-150, a Super Duty, I'm your guy. Norman.James at OakRidgeFord.com, at Norman OakRidgeFord on Instagram. Throw me some follows, guys. It would mean a lot. We're ramping up towards the end of a big finish to May. Tons of deals. I can get you into an F-150 lease for next to nothing. Reach out to me to find out how. Sheldon Keefe, how does he improve the Devils? At first glance, he's going to a team that is similarly constructed to the one that he left.
Well, I think their defense is better. At least, they have 2 really great young prospects in Simon Nemec and Luke Hughes. They have Dougie Hamilton, who's a top-flight offensive defenseman. Now, he was out for most of the year last year with an injury, and he'll be back, presumably back 100% healthy. Mm-hmm. And they have some other decent defensemen. Siegenthaler's not bad. So they're the pieces there. I mean, they started to address their goaltending with the trade for Jake Allen at the deadline. They're supposedly going to be in the same market as the Leafs are for a goaltender. They could be in on Markstrom. They could be in on UC Saros. So they have some similar issues, but I think defensively, depth-wise, they're inexperienced and not particularly great in their own end, but there's a lot of talent there. And they have Jack Hughes and Heishier. So, he's got a lot to work with. And Fitzgerald's going to get to work this summer and try to address their issues.
Thing about Sheldon Keefe, great guy, solid coach. As you said, his time came to an end. What he could offer expended. And as he admitted, in the aftermath of his firing, he just couldn't get the job done. And that job, obviously meaning leading the Leafs to a Stanley Cup championship. So it's on to the next guy, Craig Berube, introduced by Brad Treliving on Tuesday after the long weekend here in Canada. I didn't really get anything from him that makes me believe that he's the chosen one and that, you know, he is going to be the guy to lead these group of these players all the way to the promised land. Then again, you know, it's just the first opening salvo in an introduction to the latest head coach for this team, who may or may not have success. There's a lot of other things to unwind and tie up and button up and reconfigure in the interim. But you know, he was just there, and I'm not necessarily disappointed about it. I'm not excited about it either, and maybe that's just because we're kind of in a malaise following another disappointing season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was much to learn and glean from the presser. They were holding their cards pretty close to the vest. They didn't commit, you know, Treliving or Brendan Shanahan. I mean, you know, obviously the goal is change of some sort. It is, you know, new message. He's going to be more forceful, I think. I think structurally is going to be different. Motivationally, he's going to be different. But the team is going to have to be different. And that's where I think the rubber meets the road. You know, Brad Treliving is going to have to get to work before the draft, during the draft, and after the draft to change a lot of things that this team has struggled with over the last few years. He may not be able to do all of it this summer. It depends on a lot of outside factors. But I think that definitely a message change and maybe a method change. But from the presser, I mean, it was pretty much boilerplate. You know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. He was asked, Trolling was asked questions about the roster. And, you know, he really can't commit to it because we don't know what is going to happen. We know certain things. We know Austin Matthews and William Nylander are going to be back. We know that Morgan Riley most likely won't even be asked to waive his no trade clause. If they did, they would no move clause. If they did, they'd be stupid because the one thing that this team is short on is defense, and he's their best defenseman. He's not a number one, but he's a pretty good defenseman. So you know, the slings and arrows that he faced after the playoffs or after the elimination against Boston are just crap. And John Tavares, who's like second or third in scoring on Team Canada at the World Championships, and who's playing like, you know, who tied the game against Switzerland in the semifinal? Oh, gee, this guy wears 91. Who the hell is? Oh, he's pretty good, isn't he? Who does he play for? He's not waving, guys. Stop it.
Mike, I love when you get fired up. Craig Berube says he'd like his team to play heavy hockey. It's one thing to want that. It's another thing to implement it. And it's another thing for the team to actually demonstrate it. So what does he mean by heavy hockey, Michael?
Well, he doesn't mean, and he explained this, he doesn't mean drop the gloves and beat the crap out of anybody, but he used heavy hockey, meaning being strong on the puck, being tenacious, checking wise. He also said, I like to go north. And that doesn't mean to North Bay or you know, whatever, or cottage country. He means attacking forwardly. It means not playing east-west, playing north-south. And that's, you know, that is more physical. That is more in-your-face hockey. And I think, you know, you saw from what he coached and how he coached with the Blues that's the type of style that he plays. To do that, and to do that effectively, you need a certain brand of player.
Right.
And that's where things will hopefully change.
Marc Savard, seems like those in Calgary are pretty happy that he's no longer there. You know, his assistants can quietly be heroic, and they can also, you know, get shit on for, you know, a variety of reasons, fair or unfair. He's unemployed, looking for a gig. There have been a lot of reports linking him to a spot on Craig Berube's staff. Are those like rumors legitimate? And, you know, if he does get the job, what can Marc Savard bring to the Maple Leafs that perhaps other associate or assistant coaches haven't?
Well, Savard was an assistant in St. Louis the year after the Blues won the Cup. He was primarily working with the power play.
Right.
He was a very creative center with Calgary and Boston and a few other teams in his career before concussion issues ended them. Then he coached the Windsor Spitfires for a couple years, and then he went to be an assistant in Calgary. It sounds like, I mean, you never know about the statements, but it sounds like mutually parted their ways. I mean, my impression was, he's going to take a job with the Leafs, and this is a way, okay, we'll part ways, and you can feel free to go and take that job. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But the rumors of Marc Savard were popping up even before he mutually parted ways with the Flames. So I expect him to be joining the Leafs staff, but it's not 100% guaranteed. All I know is that right now, of the current staff, Mike Van Ryan, who coached with Berube in St. Louis, is probably the guy who stays, most likely to stay. Manny Malhotra already took a job coaching Abbotsford in the AHL. So guys like Dean Chenoweth and other assistants, they're up in the air. And Berube might decide to keep them, but he might decide to bring in his own guys. And I if I had to bet money, I would say Savard is going to be joining the Leafs staff.
Look, he's a power play specialist. He was, I wouldn't say integral, but he was a component to success in St. Louis, as a guy who was trying to facilitate, better opportunity for the players on that power play. If we can bring in anybody to help reassess, reconfigure, potentially reimagine this Maple Leafs situation with the man advantage, then bring them in, right? Because I mean, the lack of scoring with the extra man, especially when it counted down the stretch, is one of the main reasons the Leafs, weren't able to, close out games and win and, find that success when it really, really counted. So if Marc Savard does come on board and he has a little bit more ingenuity than his predecessor, then it's worth a try.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And clearly, from the All-Star break forward, whatever was working with the Leafs power play, which is first or second in the league at that point, and then was the worst in the league. And that, as you said, I think they had one power play goal in the postseason. That's a killer. I mean, there were other factors, but that was a killer.
Mike, real quick, not to interrupt you, but how does it change? I mean, the system's the system. The players who are trying to implement that system on the ice can be changed and moved in and out, but generally they're the same guys. You've got your most powerful and deadly offensive players on the ice with the extra man. Like, what the hell? Can we even put our finger on what the hell happened? The system was the system, the players were the players, and then it just went kerplunk.
Well, I mean, it's all tactical. And, I know that usually, and I've been told this by, different scouts or observers or even just people, lay people, when it comes to the NHL. The first half of the season pretty much is throwaway. It's pretty much in terms of the way teams play defense. Right. Second half of the season, teams start to strap down and play a lot more tactically, a lot more. How do we neutralize this power play? How do we? And in the second half of the year, I mean, looking at it objectively in terms of the Leafs power play, nobody respects Morgan Riley's shot from the point. He's a puck distributor. Mitch Marner doesn't shoot the puck. So, okay, that they're not going to shoot. So who's shooting? Nylander, Matthews, and sometimes Tavares. Okay, so you're daring those guys to shoot, and they don't want to shoot. They want to get guys who can shoot. So by doing that, they're neutralizing the trigger men on the power play. Now technically, I don't know how those teams do it. Whether they just put guys right on Matthews, right on Nylander in their face. But whatever it was, it worked. And I think that whoever coaches the power play going forward, what they're going to do, maybe Marner won't be there. Right. We'll talk about that in a minute. You saw what Brad Treliving, after a couple weeks on the job, tried to do last summer, bringing in a right-hand shot power play quarterback in John Klingberg. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but the recognition was there that in spite of how good offensively Morgan Riley is, and he's fine as a second power or as a second unit power play quarterback, as a top pairing quarterback, he doesn't have the shot from the point, and you need that threat. So, I think that may be something that Brad Treliving tries to address as well.
Can a power play thrive to its full capability, regardless of who's down low, if you don't have that bomber at the point?
It can, but I mean, let's just say it's a plus to have that. When you have, there's only one puck. So if you have Nylander and Matthews shooting at being the trigger men, you want to get the puck to them, but you want the threat of somebody like a Klingberg when he was healthy, bombing it from the point. Then the defense, then the penalty killers have to respect it. They can't leave them wide open. So you see this in the playoffs right now with a Brandon Montour, who will be a free agent this summer. Maybe a guy like Evan Bouchard in Edmonton, who's an excellent power play quarterback. You see Adam Fox, who may be hurt right now with the Rangers. He's not producing as much offensively. But when you have an effective power play quarterback who can distribute and get the puck on the net, it gives your power play an immense ability to be more diversified.
Hey, this is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario, oakridgeford.com. Thanks to Mark Stevens and everybody at the dealership for their support of this podcast throughout the season. I think we're about to roll over from season 6 to season 7, and season 7 is going to be better than ever. OG's Converts, if you're in the chat, thank you very much. I see the discussion is always lively. I acknowledge you. I'm watching your discussions as I'm listening to the omniscient, sage-wise Michael Augello. We can't get everybody into the chat, but you just keep doing you. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. We're not going anywhere. Neither are you. Let's grow this thing together. If Mitch Marner decides to allow the Leafs to entertain offers for him and then they ultimately seal a deal, part of the package coming back, whether it's to your liking, Mike, or it's just what it is, the hope is that the return will be an individual who might be able to supplant a Marner on the power play. And I'm not talking positionally, but just in terms of personnel. Mitch Marner, there's regardless of the reports you read, on one hand, he's not going anywhere and he's a jerk. And on the other hand, there are actually opportunities out there. I'll believe it when I see it. Mr. Augello. I'll believe it when I see it. I will say this, though. If Mitch Marner is open to being dealt, he will have a list of where he wants to go. And if he's serious about it, he's going to give the Leafs some ability to maneuver and have discussions. Regardless of where he ends up, you'd have to think, even if the other party in the transaction isn't willing to give everything up for a guy who, in some circumstances, you would have to. The package would be somewhat reasonable, and to come out of this contractual situation and move on. The Leafs may have to bite a bit of a bullet, but I just can't see how they're going to get completely robbed in any scenario that may present itself here in the next months ahead.
Well, I've heard, for lack of a better term, glitterati, the insiders, the more expert people on the radio say, well, the Leafs have to be prepared to lose the trade. And by that, I think they mean, well, not get everything that they're looking for as part of a return. I mean, to an extent, I understand what they're saying, but this is an important deal, and if you're not clearing all $11 million of his cash, and they would have to, if they're getting something back, if they're being forced to take salary back in a deal, it's got to be somebody who's effective. It can't be, well, we're going to dump salary on you. They're not at that point that they can do that. So, for the first things first here, and we started to hear, and even to a point that a Nashville reporter asked Barry Trotz about having interest in Mitch Marner, because there were some, David Pagnotta from the fourth period and a few other outlets were saying, well, Nashville makes sense, and the Leafs need goaltending, and they got Saros and Askarov, and he can't say anything because that would be tampering. So so everybody, Pierre LeBrun has talked about it and said, well, the Leafs haven't even approached Marner and Darren Ferris about waiving.
How would they know?
Well, I would say somebody like Pierre or Elliott would know. Okay. And, they would know either from the agent, or they would know from the player, or they would know from the team. So I take them at their word. Their reputation is golden. But what I'm saying is, if they haven't even talked about it yet, it's the last week of May. The draft is the last weekend of June. So over the next month, they will have an idea. And the first thing would be going to the Marner's camp and saying, now this, if the Leafs want to trade him, then they're saying, okay, Mitch, Darren, we're not going to offer you an extension.
Do we even know that the Leafs officially want to trade Mitch Marner?
No, and we're not going to, and they're not going to acknowledge that, because then that weakens their negotiating position either way. Now, say for example, Brad Treliving goes to them and says, we want to talk 8-year extension.
Right.
Okay. What are we talking here? Well, we're going to pay you $10 million and you're making 10.9. Then Darren Ferris is going to tell them to stick it where the sun don't shine. And then, or if the Leafs say, well, we're not going to offer you an extension, it sort of forces their hand. Now, if the Marner camp decides we're going to play out the year and go free agent, right, then the Leafs are screwed, because essentially then they're stuck. They can't.
What a miserable thing to do, though. Why, like, from Marner's perspective, why would you come back to a place that you not only professionally feel unwanted, but socially are really, really thought of in a poor light? Whether it's fair or not, you are a representation of this team's overall failures to get the job done when it really counts. But what a miserable thing to do, to just draw the line in the sand and say, fuck it, I'll see you guys. You can all boo me. I'm just going to ride up the time. It just be such a toxic environment for the team and for that player. And I can't think it would be good for his mental health. And like, he'd be able to just rebound and go back to being a solid guy and then assimilate into a brand new set of circumstances, making all the money. I mean, it's just a miserable thing to do. And I'd like to see some responsibility on both parts here.
And that's why there's a school of thought that, he wouldn't do that. But now there's a benefit for him if he says, I'll waive my no move clause if I can go to one of these 3 or 4 different teams, because he gets the 8th year on an extension. It would be basically a sign and trade. It would be like what Seth Jones, and his name has popped up, what Seth Jones did when he was traded from Columbus to Chicago. He had a year left in his contract. He signed an 8-year extension right after the trade, or even Columbus may have signed him, and then it was part of a sign and trade. Right. That is a possibility, but that limits what the Leafs can get back. Now, I started a series, and I'm going to be writing this week at Hockey Buzz about potential Marner destinations, and factoring in this is, would Mitch Marner want to play for this team?
Right.
And Nashville is a possibility. He's got some former teammates there, Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen. But it's a great place to play. It's a non-tax state in the U.S. It's not overly invasive in terms of media. There's not as much as, nobody has as much media as Toronto, but
they'll love him down there.
Yeah, right. So, and then they're starving for offense, and the fit in terms of what they have in abundance might fit. Now, I'm going to write about that later in the week. But the first team that I wrote about was Chicago. And Chicago's got a boatload of draft picks. They have a boatload of cap space. They have a young phenom in Connor Bedard, who they want to get somebody who can feed him the puck. And Marner is an expert at that.
Would you take a package of prospects and picks for Marner? or would you want somebody who's ready to be plugged in and played right now? Because the Leafs need help now.
Well, you can always. I'm not sure about prospects. It depends on the quality of the prospect, right. But you can convert draft picks into players. So would you okay, for example, Chicago has 5 first-round picks, 7 second-round picks, and 4 third-round picks over the next 3 years.
Right.
A couple of those first and second-round picks are the Leafs from the Jake McCabe deal.
Yeah.
So if you could get 3 or 4 draft picks in a deal for Marner, and they take the entire $11 million cap space, and then you turn those draft picks into players, sure, I would do that. Now, people would say, oh my God, you gave away an all-star for draft picks. Well, what are you going to get for the draft picks in return? So, it's currency. Now, the name that has been mentioned, it was mentioned even before, not even in connection with Marner, by Elliot Friedman a couple weeks ago, was Seth Jones. Seth Jones is 29 years old. He's a right-hand shot defenseman. He's big. He's tough. He's pretty, he could point a power play. He's got a big shot from the point. He's a minutes eater. So, as part of a Marner deal with a Seth Jones, now he's got a no move clause. He would want to come to Toronto. I believe his dad, who was an NBA player, played in Toronto, so he's not completely unfamiliar with the city, but he would have to approve it. He's got 6 years left in a contract at $9.5 million. So all the cap space that would be opened up by a Marner deal to Chicago would be eaten up mostly by Seth Jones. So it depends on what you want to do. That would be a top pairing guy that you could add. They have prospects, but I get the feeling this is a win now team, and you've got guys in their mid-20s like Nylander and Matthews that are 26, 27 years old. You've got Tavares in his third. Yeah, of course. Seth Jones is not horrible. You're clueless. You don't know what you're talking about. I mean, you're looking at it back because he's got a $9.5 million salary. He deserved it. Now, he's playing with one of the worst teams in the league, and it's impossible to look good when you're playing with crap.
Right.
So shut up. I mean, my God, how, now if you don't want, I understand. If you don't want to take a 6-year commitment on defense, I get that. I understand that. But the problem is that anybody you sign in free agency with the cap space that you open up by trading Marner, how long do you think you're going to be signing them for? 5, 6, 7 years.
So, Mike, we don't want OG's conference, we love you. But in essence, we don't want our own guys. We don't want the possibilities coming back. Right? Then what? I want this guy. We want to move out who we dislike and who we don't want around anymore, and who we are devaluing by undercutting for amazing players that we think should play for the Maple Leafs, and that we can get back for the guys we dislike and are devaluing. It doesn't make sense. But it's just everybody's so ramped up in emotion and frustration and disappointment.
But okay, I get it. Because I used to be a fan before I became a member of the media and became more sort of logical and less emotional. I'm still emotional sometimes, but more
like it.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's like, this isn't fantasy hockey. It's not Stratomatic hockey. It's like, in terms of making a trade, you're going to have to take something in this, or you're going to have to, if the goal here is to get, you're not going to trade him to Los Angeles and get Quentin Byfield. You're not going to trade him to Utah and get Clayton Keller and Lawson Krause. It's like, you're going to, if you can get somebody in the deal that helps you and alleviate your cap space situation, or, as I've said over the last few years, reallocate the funds. It's not that Mitch Marner is a bad player. He's a very good player. It's just you're spending over $46 million on 4 forwards, and your defense has suffered because of it. And you cannot win. If you look at the teams in the playoffs right now, look at the Rangers. Their top 4 is great. Look at Florida. They're 1 through 6, excellent. The only team that has got a crap defense, and by crap I mean the second half of their blue line, is Edmonton, and they only have Draisaitl and McDavid. So you need defense and you need goaltending to win in this league, and this team is allocating too much money at forward and not enough on defense and goaltending.
Yeah, there's nothing to litigate right now because nothing has happened yet. I mean, we can speculate, we can get excited, we can fret and be fearful of the potential outcomes of the Marner entanglement and how the Leafs unwind themselves from it, whether it's going to benefit them in both ways, getting rid of the player, freeing up money, and getting everything back. It's a long shot. Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi, what's going on with those guys? Will we see them in blue and white come September?
Well, the report, I know Pierre LeBrun reported that there is mutual interest. Bertuzzi and Domi would like to come back to Toronto, and Toronto would like to bring them back. It's all a question of term and money, and that ties into Marner. Everything flows through what the Leafs can do in terms of opening up cap space. Now, obviously, and Pierre LeBrun reported this, and he reported this probably because his source was the agent. And Domi, his agent is Judd Moldaver, the same agent as Austin Matthews. And he said, well, Domi, 5 or 6 year deal at between $5 or $6 million. Okay. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He scored 9 goals last year. Now, he fit in well. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be paid.
Is it the term or the money average annual value?
Both. Right. He's 29 years old. And the agent is doing their job. They're going to push for as much money and as much term. But if I'm the Leafs, you want to play in Toronto so bad? Okay, we'll give you 4 years and we'll give you $4 million.
Right.
If it's more than that, maybe you move on around a little bit. But he scored 9 goals last year. Mm-hmm. He played better down the stretch. He played well in the playoffs. He's the type of player I think they would like to. He's got flexibility. He can play center and wing. But where they are right now, they can't spend. Now, this is assuming.
Fine. Is this worth definitive? I don't know. It's
negotiable. Everything's negotiable.
Yeah. Right.
But you have to play on. He supposedly wants to play in Toronto. Well, there's a Toronto tax here. There is. It's like, you want to play here so bad. Okay, well then take a little less.
Right. And Tyler Bertuzzi, what goes on with him? Are they comparable in what they should be compensated?
No, I think Bertuzzi would probably earn more because he scores more. He was a ghost the first half of the season and then really turned it on the second half. I think the chances of Domi, and then Chris Johnston said this, he rated it as like Domi being like an 85% chance that he'd be back, and Bertuzzi more, like maybe less than 50-50.
But he's the heavy type of hockey player Craig Berube really might be able to connect with and ignite him to a greater extent.
Sure, but again, the question is, how much are you prepared to pay? And even if they're able to trade Marner, you're going to have to go into free agency. And somebody mentioned a guy like Tanev. You have to go into free agency right now, and on this defense, add 2 defensemen.
Right.
Now, it's either one defenseman is part of a Marner deal and another one in free agency. There's Pesce, there's Montour, there's Tanev, there's Zadorov. All these guys none of them are going to be cheap.
Right.
You're going to be paying some of these defensemen as much or more than what TJ Brody was making. So that, you have to have the cap space and have to have the flexibility. Right. So if you're going to allocate $10 to $12 million to 2 blue liners, how can you allocate $8 or $9 or $10 million to 2 more forwards?
And Mike, it's not like the Leafs are low in supply of forwards. They have forwards. They might not all be able to do what you'd like them to do, at least at this stage of their careers, because some of their careers have barely begun. But the Leafs they have a surplus of forwards. Whether they're the right forwards, that remains to be seen. But it's on defense that the team lacks, not only in quality, but in bodies. So, man, the summer to come is just going to be super intriguing as to how things unfold for the Maple Leafs. There's just so much to do. But you made the point over and over again, and you're correct in this calculation that nothing gets done until truly gets done until the Leafs figure out in what direction they're going to go with Mitch Marner. Bring him back, just let it ride, or somehow untangle themselves from their commitment to him, and say thank you very much for your services and welcome someone else new to the fray, along with the ability to welcome more players in, because your final financial commitment has been freed up, and you can reallocate that money. What about the Final Four, Mike? I got to say that, I know a lot of OGs and Converse don't like Edmonton, so don't yell at me, but I'm actually quietly hoping they can get this job done. For a lot of the reasons that you've stated, they are not a complete team, yet here they are in the mix with teams that are a little bit more comprised of the full set of players that you would need to go all the way. So I wouldn't say they're playing shorthanded. They still have the best player in the playoffs in Connor McDavid, and Leon Draisaitl's been phenomenal too. But forget about the Canada thing. You know what? I'm all in on Edmonton to go and do this thing and maybe be the first Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup since 1993. Last point to you. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely 180 degrees opposite. I would like to see them go down in 3. But they've already won a game, and they Dallas should have won game 1, and I think Edmonton came up short in game 2. I mean, I picked Dallas in the series. I'm hoping for Dallas. I'm not against another Canadian team, winning and breaking that 33-year skid, but not them, and not Montreal, and not Ottawa. So the other 4, I'm all on board for. But no. And the Rangers in Florida, that series has been pretty interesting so far. I mean, Florida really shut the Rangers down in game 1 and in game 2. I think the Rangers pushed back a little bit. I think it's going to be a very physical series. And again, these are the teams that you're going to have to get through in the East.
Right.
And look at how they're constructed with Lomberg and Cousins and Bennett and all these miserable bastards that Florida has. You have to be able to be just as miserable and just as much of a pain in the ass to get through that team. Right. So that's the direction that Brad Treliving is going to be. Size, it's going to be strength, it's going to be sandpaper, and you're going to need scoring as well. All those S's.
So ever since Florida squeaked into the playoffs last year and then came back from the 3-1 deficit to upset the Bruins and turn hockey onto its head. They've been playing pressure-free hockey, and they've done really well at it. Are they going to grip it a little tight here if they fall behind in the series? Because, Matt Tkachuk has said it. Look, this is a group of guys who really should get the job done, and where we've come from and how close we got in the past to where we are now. It's the order of things to complete this deal. Then along come the Rangers, win the regular season, have the best goalie on the planet, and I wouldn't say a freight train out of control, but they're turning into a juggernaut. To me, if the Rangers don't win here, they'll just come back and try it again next year. Florida has put itself in a position to, maybe close the deal on this thing. If they fall behind, we're going to see this team play, pressure-filled hockey for the first time in over a year and a bit. I'm wondering how they would respond to that.
Well, I mean, they have enough experience there, and they have some players who are playing for big contracts, whether it be in Florida or someplace else. So,
and you mentioned that there's, free agency. Bill Zito's got to contend with some free agency. So I wouldn't say that the window has closed, but this is a pretty big deal to finally get this thing done.
Yeah, I don't think the pressure would be on Florida really unless they, got swept in the 2 games in Sunrise and they go back to MSG down 3-1. I mean, I think right now they're a confident team. They have, the experience of getting to the Cup final last year. The Rangers have had a tough time scoring. So I think at the absolute worst, they're going to go back to New York tied 2-2. Maybe they win 2 games in Florida. They're playing pressure free right now. They're one of the best teams in the league. I picked the Rangers in 7 because I just think the Rangers, they have the better goaltending, but there's some injury concerns. Now VC's hurt. Now, Fox may be playing at less than 100%, a lot of that stuff. And T-Sack in the chat says Yankees suck. You're looking up at them right now as they're in first place. Enjoy it.
How did that happen?
How did that happen? A guy named Juan Soto.
Yeah.
And
what do you think? Like, again, like as much as the Yankees could afford him, and I know that the head of the Yankees has already talked about tailoring the pay scale down a little bit because it's unsustainable, and I think that would be for any team. And the Yankees could afford him if they wanted to, but a guy like Juan Soto, if he has a huge year and leads the biggest team in baseball outside of the Dodgers right now to any kind of success. Can you imagine the ticket that he'd be able to write for himself? There'd be no reason to re-sign with the Yankees during the season when, he's just going to, like, again, financially, to talk, there's Shohei Ohtani's contract, but Juan Soto's would be close behind.
Well, I mean, the Ohtani contract has a lot of deferred money.
Right.
So I've heard it said that really his contract is not $70 million. It's more like 45 with all the deferred money. I mean, Soto is going to make $50 million. I mean, but you have to say right now, though, that the reason that the Yankees are doing so well is because even without Garrett Cole, who's starting to get back and ramp up, they're pitching.
Everybody's clicking.
Yeah, everybody. You got a guy who came back from Tommy John surgery, Luis Heel, who is 6-1 with an ERA like close to 2. And that's, you don't expect that kind of stuff. I was encouraged, by the way, Alek Manoah pitching well for the Blue Jays, and then he got hammered in his last game. But it sounds like he's back on the positive track. But there's just something missing with the Blue Jays.
Yeah, right? I get it. And they spent hundreds of millions of dollars to renovate Rogers Center.
And nobody's showing up.
Yeah, they brought the capacity down to about 40,000 with the expectation this team would be in a hunt. Look, fans want more, and they will protest by not showing up. I'd hate to see that place half empty when it really should be at capacity, watching a team that's right in the mix. Because at the end of the day, Mike, there really is no reason for the Jays not to be over 500. If all things were right, clearly they are not. Anyway, that's the extent of the baseball talk, and that'll wrap it up for the Leafs Convo. OG's Converse, thanks so much for being here. HockeyBuzz.com. Mike's got a series coming up on the Mitch Marner trade possibilities, where he may end up. That'll be a really interesting read, as it always is. And you know me, just slinging steel for the Ford Motor Company at Norman Oakridge Ford on Instagram. Throw me some follows, guys. I'm even on TikTok now trying to generate some more hype and a little bit more interest in what I do on the car end of things. Like the content, subscribe to the channel, stick around the project that is the Leafs Convo on YouTube. There's always something there, a post, a poll, and it's good to stay connected with us throughout because we're going to have so much more content to come. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. Enjoy your beautiful Sunday wherever you are. We'll see you in a few days' time. The Leafs Convo is out of here.